So first of all, the cost of selling a business, it's a lot. Of course, the M&A advisor, they tell you up front what their fee is, and you can pretty much calculate what that is. You also need an accountant, right? You need a quality of earnings. You need an attorney, and you get what you pay for.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I'm your host, Nick Olson. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. My guest today is a financial advisor with Raymond James, working closely with a select group of business owners and their families. He is a former CEO who turned around the largest international theatrical licensing company before selling it to a private equity-backed music licensing group. He brings a background in both public and private equity investment management. He leverages his own exit experience to help business owners optimizing their value, and known for combining Wall Street experience with firsthand entrepreneurial insights to guide business owners through complex exit planning decisions. Please welcome my guest today, Nate Collins. Nate, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thanks, Nick. Going great. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, excited about our conversation here today. And, we're talking about your journey from business owner to financial advisor, what you learned from your experience in selling your company, how you're employing that into working with your clients now as a financial advisor and helping, those your clients realize, their wealth opportunities, especially with the sale of their business. But why don't we start with, sharing your story of the company that you ran, that you exited. What did you do? How did you grow it? And what eventually led to your eventual exit?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you a little bit about it. So the company that I ran was called Samuel French. And the company, let's see, for those of you out there who have children, you may have children who are in the school play. Say the school, Nick, what town are you from?
Green Bay, Wisconsin.
That's right, Green Bay, Wisconsin. Well, I'm sure that Green Bay High School, or whatever it's called, Roosevelt High School, Cheesehead High School, once a year they put on a musical. Let's call it Grease, the musical. Well, the drama teacher had to license the musical in order to produce it in front of other people, because that's intellectual property. So they would apply for a license from the rights holder. My company, we represented the rights holder. We were an agent for the rights holder. And so it's not very expensive. And hopefully everybody who ever does a play or a musical out there gets the rights. Otherwise, they're stealing intellectual property. But, we did 40,000 licenses a year. So it was very process-oriented heavy. And a lot of people would say, given my background is actually in finance. I'd been working on different investment banks prior to that and private equity. But they would say, how did you go from finance to theater? Well, what we were doing we were not a theater company. We were really an asset management company and a licensing company. So we would get the rights, or we'd enter into an agreement with the rights holder. That rights holder would be the author or the composer or the lyricist of a play or musical. And we would have exclusive licensing rights for that property for a certain term in a certain geographic area. And then we try to maximize the value of that property by issuing not just the most amount, but the best licenses possible. So that's what the company did. The company that I took it over in 2011. It had been originally founded in 1830, so there was a long history there. The company was owned by 16 private shareholders, representing about 6 different families. Some of those families all came from one original family, and then there were some splinters off. And so it was a very wide group of investors who, actually, I wouldn't call them investors. I'd call them more shareholders, because they hadn't gone into that business, hadn't invested in that business with intent. And there's a long story there, but I'm not going to necessarily kind of slow down this podcast going into that. So that was the business. And when I took it over in 2011, it had been just, it had been run like a family business for decades. And I can remember some of the processes were just so antiquated. The average licensing time for any request was 4.5 weeks. You wanted to do Peter Pan the musical, you'd enter a license request. It'd come to us via email. Then somebody at our firm would enter it into the computer, and then there was a bunch of steps, and it'd take 4.5 weeks. And so there was a lot of opportunity to improve upon the processes. It'd be any M&A advisor's just nightmare come dream. We institutionalized the business. And so by the time that we sold the business in 2019, that average licensing time was down to 4 hours. So 4.5 weeks to 4 hours. A lot of those licenses were auto licensed with proper technology. We just had really good technology. That was one of the reasons that we were able to sell at such a high multiple, was we had the best tech stack. And so the company that bought ours, Concord Music Company, which is one of the largest private music licensing companies in the world, they adopted most of our tech stack so that they could, even though they were much larger than us, maybe 20 times revenue than we were, they were able to adopt our platform and put their entire processes on our tech stack. So, it was a great experience, and I loved being a CEO, and I loved the exit, although I learned a lot from the exit. I had some challenges also.
We'll dive into those challenges and whatnot in a second. So what was the ultimate deciding factor that you said, "Oh, I'm going to sell. I want to get out"?
Yeah, so there were probably 3 things that led to that decision to sell. First of all, we just had, as I said, fractured ownership. So there was a lot of competing interests. It was not a family business in which a lot of family members were employed. And so some people wanted the company because of sentimental reasons. Other people they didn't have much of an ownership stake, so they didn't really care. And then some people really wanted more dividends. And so everybody had competing interests. Not everybody, but there were a lot of competing interests. And it was hard to really satisfy anybody. The way that the operating agreement was structured made it very difficult to transfer ownership of shares from one person to another. Another thing is there was a lot of money entering the industry, and the company that eventually bought us had purchased up a few of our competitors, was doing a roll-up. And as I said, they're one of the largest music licensing companies in the world, private equity backed, worth billions. And it would be very difficult for us to compete against them when it comes to acquiring new titles. So that was the second thing, money entering the industry. And then the third thing was I forget who said it. It was told to me by a friend of mine, but one of the keys to having a successful exit is to sell too early. Always sell too early, because if you're not selling too early, you're going to sell too late. And it was just a really good time for us to sell. We had been growing. We turned around the company in the first few years. I was there for about a decade. First few years kind of stabilized the company. And then over the last several years, we started recognizing some significant growth. We were really kind of being able to, pick the fruits of our labors. So it was just the right time for us.
So how did you go about it? Did you hire an investment bank or an advisory firm? How did you go through that process?
Yeah, so an investment banker came to me and said, "Hey, I know a couple people that would like to buy your business." And
so the unsolicited offer.
The unsolicited offer, exactly. To her credit, she was an amazing investment banker, because we wanted to keep it a very quiet deal, because we were afraid that if it got out there in the public, it's such a small industry that we would not be able to compete. If some transaction did not go through, then we didn't want to have kind of mud on our face. So we didn't have a real traditional auction process, but our investment banker, I'm sure she made it sound like we did. And she is just a fierce, fierce competitor. And she made sure that we got top dollar. She did a great job. And, a testament to all investment bankers out there, all M&A advisors out there. You're going to, thank goodness for all of you helping us business owners, achieve top dollar for our businesses.
Were there any, surprises along the way that you can remember that kind of maybe like, wow, didn't realize this was going to happen or that would happen?
Yes. I mean, there were so many surprises because you just don't know until you actually do it. And people can tell you things, look, people tell you what it's like to have children, but until you have children, you have no idea what you're in for. You're like, oh yeah, I hear it's hard the first few years. Well, just wait. Just wait. I hear you don't get sleep the first few years. Yeah, well, just you wait. So yeah, anybody out there who's thinking of selling their business and who hasn't sold their business, just you wait. I'm going to tell you right now, it's hard, but you're not going to get it until you're in it. So first of all, the cost of selling a business, it's a lot. Of course, the M&A advisor, they tell you up front what their fee is, and you can pretty much calculate what that is. And that's understood. But what you don't think about necessarily is that you also need an accountant, probably, right? You need a quality of earnings, which if you're selling your business for more than $10 million, you should definitely have a quality of earnings, or else you're at a distinct disadvantage. You need an attorney. And I'm not talking about your divorce attorney or your cousin Vinny, right? I'm talking about like a real M&A attorney, and you get what you pay for. I highly recommend getting a legitimate M&A attorney with significant experience. And then you have the data rooms, which isn't all that much, but you have those extra costs, and you have consultants. Maybe you need a real estate valuation or something like that. It's just a lot. And then of course, due diligence. Due diligence is a bear, and it's a second job, or it's a third job. If you're a CEO, you're running your company, you're probably managing your personal life. That could include a family. And then you have a third job, which is due diligence. So it's incredibly hard.
Can you imagine, or I'm sure you're thankful of having that investment banker in your corner helping that out, because what is your opinion on if you would have ran that process yourself without an investment banker, and what you think that might look like?
I mean, I really believe that our company was worth half of what we sold it for. So
she paid for herself a couple times over.
Yeah. So, in my mind, our investment banker increased the value of our company by 100%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is pretty astonishing.
Yeah. And then also, the people that we were selling to were professionals at buying businesses, right? It's like asking me to go and play running back for the Denver Broncos. Like, yeah, sure, I go out and jog 3 miles a few times a week, right? So, and I go to the weight room, but I don't do this professionally. They just, if you were in the business of buying companies professionally, which is what they were, you're going to be able to take advantage of a buyer who's never sold a business, or I'm sorry, a seller who's never sold a business before. So you as a seller, you had better arm yourself with a great group of advisors, your M&A advisor, your M&A attorney, your a transaction accountant, and then your personal team, your personal CPA, your financial advisor, your wealth advisor, and maybe a certified exit planning advisor. You should have all of those people on your team, or else you're going to make mistakes that you will not discover that those mistakes were made until a year later. And you're going to miss out on opportunities, not just financial opportunities, not just on optimizing the value of your business, optimizing the value of your wealth, but you're also going to miss out on other opportunities because you are going to be so angst ridden, so overwhelmed, so in the weeds of this process that when opportunities come to you, you're just not going to recognize them you're not going to have the wherewithal to take advantage of them. So now I forgot what the question was, but
no, it was just, going at it yourself as as a CEO of the company. You mentioned 3 jobs before. Add a 4th job on there, running a whole process as well. And what's gonna be impacted.
yeah,
First and foremost, the business. You take your eye off the business for 6-8 months, like it's not gonna go well.
right.
And everything that goes with that. So then your numbers are declining. Now, does that mean your company is worth less? Buyer wants to retrade, like all those sorts of things that come into play. But just talk about that a little bit. Going through the process with a investment banker, still running the company. I'm thinking about what that looks like if you did both those jobs.
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate that I'd built the company to run fairly well without me, so I could really kind of focus on I could focus on working on the business and not in the business. I didn't really realize that until several years after I'd sold the business and started talking to other business owners who really are in it every day. The reason I did that, by the way, is not because I'm some smart guy who realized that this would increase the value of my business. I did it because I don't like putting out fires. And if I'm always working in the business, that means I'm not thinking about process, and I'm not thinking about how to make our business more efficient, and how to like dig out the root of problems instead of just pulling out the leaves. So, we had a very robust team, a robust management team. We spent a lot of time on training our employees and working on ensuring that we had people, long tenure, and really quality people. So fortunately, when it came to the due diligence process, running the process, I was able to do the I was able to perform the due diligence, or a lot of the due diligence, but still I was in the office till 9 o'clock on Friday nights and Saturdays and Sundays, just performing the due diligence. However, if I had to run the process also, I wouldn't have been able to do that. It would have been too much. I couldn't even imagine how that would be, because there's a reason an M&A advisor or an investment banker can only do 2 or 3 deals at a time, because they are completely all-encompassing.
This episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. Yeah, that's definitely a full-time job, and that's why we exist. And hopefully, when we're looking at working with someone like yourself, we're able to make your life a little bit easier, not having to worry about some of that stuff. Obviously, you get pulled in, like I said, during due diligence, and have to perform some certain tasks and things that are in the process. To save that time, not have that worry about things are going to be taken care of, pulling the team together at the appropriate time, making sure that when you need the M&A attorney, like they're there and they're getting stuff done and all that sort of stuff. It's a lot of quarterbacking and moving the process forward. And as we say, time kills all deals. So making sure that we're moving efficiently forward and not letting just things take a lot of time to get done.
Yeah, our investment banker, she was amazing at that. The whole time kills all deals. She moved that process forward and was just fierce. I said fierce a few times now. She was just relentless about that, about moving it forward, never letting things stall. And the great thing about having an investment banker is that they can also be the bad guy, right? They can push the buyer, and then if something goes south, I can step in and be like, oh, you know what? I miscommunicated with the investment banker. I'm so, hey, look, I'm there with you. We're still going to get this deal done.
Yeah.
Right. You need that. You need somebody like that. Right.
Right. And ultimately, because you are going to have a relationship with the buyer after the sale, if you're sticking around for a certain period of time where you rolled some equity or whatever the case may be, an earnout. So
Yeah.
you don't want to have a toxic relationship going into, or after the sale into that new relationship, because you've had to be that person that's pushing. So I think that's definitely what role the M&A advisor plays. Anything, looking back at the process, any recommendations on or things that you learned, some do's, maybe a couple of do's and don'ts during the process that you'd want to make, you don't want to let our audience know to, hey, look out for these kinds of things. I went through it. It's not great. If you can save yourself time and, and money and effort, energy, focus on these things. What are some things that you learned?
Sure. For any of you sellers listening to this, get everything in writing. And I'm not necessarily talking about from the advisors that you hire. Yes, that is important, but getting everything in writing from the buyer. For example, I was supposed to, the agreement was I would sell the business and then I would go and lead that department, the theatrical department in the buyers, I guess, in their business. And I thought that I had met them for dinner a few times and they were nice guys and I really liked them and they were honorable and they are all of those things. But I didn't get that in writing. And in the last minute, things changed and I wasn't the head of that department anymore. And that was not what I thought we agreed to. So, but I didn't have anything in writing. I was just saying, I said, according to these conversations, and they said, yeah, but look, things change. And they did, right? As I said, they were nice people and they were trying to build a business. And what worked best for them was the ultimate decision that they made, but that didn't work for me. So that things will change. So make sure that if there are points to your deal that are very important, get those in writing.
Nice.
Do not make assumptions just based on your relationship with the buyer. And a lot of people, right, they sell their business to somebody that they know, that they've known for a long time. And they think, oh, this is great. This is a friend of mine. Everything changes. Everything changes after you sell your business. So I'd say that. Another thing is make sure you have a transferable business. And I say that just because as I said, we got very lucky. Our business was institutionalized. We'd moved it from a family business to a very professional type of business. And it made the transition or made the sale much more fluid, much easier. We had our accounting was on accrual base. And so there weren't any questions about our numbers. Our technology was, I said, pretty tight. There wasn't any, the big one, there was no key man risk. Super, super important. Probably the number one reason that businesses don't get sold is because there's key man risk. The business didn't depend on me. And that made it more valuable to the buyer. And then, have a personal tax strategy. For anybody who owns their business out there, have your personal tax strategy for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want to end up like I did, paying millions of dollars in taxes after the transaction that you could have avoided. Big mistake. I said, oh, I'll sell my business, then I'll figure out my finances. No, don't do that. That's a big don't do. Do that 3 years in advance. But also just because when you are comfortable with what your financial picture is going to look like after the transaction, you're just going to be a lot more calm and you're not going to miss those opportunities that I was talking about earlier. You're just going to be more level-headed. You're going to see things more clarity. Clarity. That's the big word. Clarity. When you have a financial plan, you have clarity. So do that.
What was it like when at the time you realized those tax implications, just kind of take us through like what you went through your mind at that point, because obviously probably a big shock.
You know that emoji with the hand in the face?
Yeah.
That was me. But that was me like on a daily basis, like, thinking as I recognized it, I said, oh, it was, at first I wanted to blame other people. And I think that's just human tendency. So, well, my M&A advisor should have told me, but that's not the M&A advisor's job, or my accountant. But my accountant was my business accountant, not my personal accountant. So it's not their job. It definitely wasn't the buyer's job to tell me. It was my job to figure it out. It was my job to know. And I had an accountant. But it's not, my accountant wasn't asking me if I was going to sell my business and if, I was going to walk away with a lot of money, and we didn't start thinking of tax mitigation strategies. If I had a financial advisor, or more so a financial planner, that would have been helpful. It was just a big mistake. And a lot of what I talk to about people, or I talk with business owners now, it's just how to be prepared for something like that, and how to structure your personal finances in a way so that you don't have that hand in face emoji moment.
So post sale, that's a great segue into what you're doing now, because you just mentioned a financial advisor, financial planner, which is what you're doing right now. And so, you are, I heard this said by someone who does podcasts, and it's a comment that he said was, "You're perfectly positioned to serve the person you once were." And that is the situation that you're in right now. And I would imagine, with that, you can better advise your clients when that exit happens, and you can plan ahead of time for that, that tax event, and, save the money and do some things with them, bring in their account if necessary, but also have an understanding of, okay, you're going to sell your business, in 3 years, in 5 years, whatever the case may be. I would imagine you're having that conversation early with your clients, and they got that at the forefront of, when they're going to run their business and how long they're going to do it and when they're going to sell. And so all that's taken care of, years in advance. So once they get to the point of the sale, you guys already have that figured out. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I had me 10 years ago. I wish I was working with somebody like myself about 10 years ago, because I would have known more. And, when it all boils down to it, it's not that expensive. The value that you derive from working with professionals is immensely greater than the cost of having those professionals, not just as far as like investment returns when you're talking to me, but just tax strategy and understanding how the business works. And there were a whole host of things that I could have asked somebody like myself, like, who should I sell this business to? Right? I thought I sold it to a strategic buyer and the money was great, but maybe I should have done a little bit more investigation into a management buyout, since I was the CEO and a minority shareholder of a company with a disengaged ownership group. Maybe a management buyout should have been something. I could have asked somebody like me, does this work? Or maybe an employee transaction. Are ESOPs the only options? No, they're not. Employee only trusts or employee ownership trusts are also options. But most people don't know that. But somebody like me, I know that. So I'm like a good person to have a conversation with a business owner about that kind of thing. Or lending, right? Do I need to liquidate my personal assets in order to make this business investment, or to buy this house? No, there are great lending products. There are great options, so that I don't incur some taxable event in order to make investments.
It's and yeah, I mean, and now know, probably a lot more than your normal financial advisor about the sale of your business too. And there are like 10 different exit options that you have at your disposal, and to go walk through each of those and what's the best fit for you. And except, as you said, you probably would have welcomed that opportunity and understanding all of those, to find the best fit for you. And, working together with a team, whether it's, your financial advisor, your M&A advisor, your accountant, your attorney, whatever, especially people that are experiencing the M&A process, having those conversations early on is going to give you more options, and give us as M&A advisors more options to go out and find, and approach different kinds of buyers. And that all is good, because then the more options you have, the more leverage you have.
Yeah, it's amazing the things that you can learn when you leverage your relationships with experienced professionals in whatever it is that you're considering. That would be my number one advice for everybody considering a transaction. Start talking to your advisors. Don't just look it up in ChatGPT, how to sell a business. Start talking to your advisors. People are willing to help, willing to give you guidance. And, they get, for the most part, they get paid upon transactions. So they're going to help you get the best transaction.
We did a study of 750 business owners at the beginning of the year. And, one of the questions was to the business owner, who is your most trusted advisor? Top of the list. What do you think top of the list was?
Accountant.
No, financial advisor.
Wow.
Financial advisor was at the top.
Makes
Accountant
sense.
is up there too, top 3, top 5. M&A attorney, your business coach, and amongst others. But the financial advisor was at the top. And one thing we talk to financial advisors about is provide value to your client, which is exactly what you're talking about. Don't be someone who's sitting on the sideline and you find out midway through the process that your client's selling their company, or hey, even worse, I just sold my company and okay, what are you doing with the assets? Where are you gonna invest it? Let me do that for you. Well, I've already talked to X, Y, and Z, and they got this proprietary program for me, and I'm going to go with them. Well, you just missed out on their biggest financial transaction. You've been managing, maybe littler sums of money, but they sell this business for $20 million. You don't want to miss out on managing those assets. And so for financial advisors, and they tell me, if this resonates with you, be along them along the process, have an understanding of what their business is worth, have that tax, implications type of conversation, advise them and be valuable to them so they don't leave you when that big transaction happens.
Yeah, I see that all the time. I see advisors losing clients for a multitude of reasons, but it usually comes down to not having a good understanding of tax strategies, or really just only being focused on the investment strategy part of the business, which in my view is only 5 to 10% of what a financial planner does. I think that the real juice or the real value of what somebody like myself does for people is that tax strategy, that risk management, that exit planning, that estate planning. And when I talk about estate planning, I'm not just talking about here, I manage this trust for you. It's actually helping people figure out not just who you'd be passing your money to and how it works, and identifying where there are traps in trusts, but also little things like, do you have a will? Do you have a durable power of attorney? Right? I don't sell wills. I don't sell durable power of attorneys, but I want to make sure that my clients have that kind of thing, because if, say, I make them 50% on their investments and then they die without a will, now all of a sudden that 50% is going to be 25% after it goes through probate and stuck there, and then there's a fight over the assets. It just my job is to ensure that somebody's entire financial life is protected.
So, and one last question, and this has been amazing. When you're looking at, a client who owns a business, one of your clients who's a business owner, when do you want to start having those conversations about, their business, their exit, what they need to get out of their business, what they want to do, post sale, just to make sure that you have the opportunity to look at those tax implications, and that they're going to have enough money to live their ideal lifestyle after the sale? Like, when are you having that conversation with your client?
As soon as they become clients, or before they become clients. They could have just started a company, and I want to start having those conversations. I believe that good exit planning is a good business plan, and that the day somebody starts their business, they should be thinking about exit planning. And there's so many reasons to that. And I do have an exit planning webinar that I do quarterly. It's an exit planning workshop done as a webinar. My next one is February 10th. But I'm sure there are going to be links in the show notes on how to register for them. I do it quarterly, and I say, exit planning is a great business plan, because it just helps get you prepared. 50% of businesses that sell are sold under duress. Duress, the 5 Ds: death, disability, disagreement, divorce, or distress. So it's important to be prepared. Nobody thinks they're going to sell under duress because of one of the 5 Ds. It just happens. So people should always have an exit plan. But ideally, if it's a new client and they come to me because they're thinking about selling their business, ideally 3 years ahead of time. Less ideally, but still effective, 3 months ahead of time. Even less, I guess, desirable, but still can do some stuff a month after they sell their business. There's still stuff we can do. I had a client this summer who, sold his business for mid 8 figures, and had he come to me 5 years earlier, he was going to pay $15 million in taxes. Had he come 5 years earlier, we could have set him up so he didn't pay any taxes, because he would have qualified for QSBS 1202. But he didn't know, because he didn't talk to his advisors. But he came to me. We've been able to save him about $1 million in taxes this year. $1 million is $1 million.
Absolutely.
It's not $15 million, but he still saved $1 million.
Yeah, and I think, business owners, make sure to, like you said, lean in and work with your advisors to make sure that you're set up in a position to sell, whether it's now, whether it's in 10 years, it doesn't matter. Always be selling, as they say, and make sure that your company is in a position to sell, tomorrow if need be. Nate, this has been amazing. Really appreciate you joining the show today. You mentioned your webinar in February. Yes, we'll get the information in the show notes. We'll share that with you. Put the link in there to sign up for that. Make sure to check that out. Where can our listeners learn more about you, Nate, and the great work that you're doing?
Great question. Thanks for asking. I hope it's in the show notes, but honestly, the easiest way to find me is to go on to Google and just Google Nate Collins, Raymond James, and I'm the person that it's going to link you to, or to go into LinkedIn and look up Nate Collins at Raymond James, and you'll find me. I think my LinkedIn handle is Nate-Collins, so it should be pretty simple.
Yeah, and make sure to connect with Nate, and definitely check out that exit planning workshop here in February. And that's all we have for today's episode. Make sure to like, share, and comment on the show. Pass this episode on to anybody you think might benefit from our conversation, especially those business owners who are looking to sell. Make sure to connect with your financial advisor early and often. Make sure your business is set up for that eventual exit. Make sure to tune in every Thursday for a brand new episode. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and all the places that you listen to podcasts on. And make sure to stay up to date when a new episode launches every Thursday morning. Until next time, everybody, take care. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.